Welcome to KissFAQ's Song Stories. In this series, we'll focus on the histories of some of Kiss's best and least known songs. In this episode, I Was Made for Loving You, originally released on Kiss's Dynasty album in 1979. In late 1978, Paul Stanley had been asked by the Indianapolis News' Zach Duncan what he thought about disco music, which was at its peak at the time. Paul responded, "I think disco music isn't that bad for what it's meant to do. It's great dance music. If I want to go dancing, there's nothing better than disco music. But I don't see any reason to play that kind of stuff in the house. Geez, what am I going to do with a disco record in my house? Dance around the living room?" That observation wouldn't have meant much to the wider public, or more particularly the New York scene. It doesn't exactly foreshadow the deliberate intent behind the song, but it does illustrate Paul's observation of the genre and its purpose and functional validity. Paul, Gene, and even Ace at times could be spotted at the legendary Studio 54 nightclub, by which that time was firmly established as an in-place. It was a place to revel in the anonymity of the moment in a seething mass, though each person consumed it for different reasons. While the hedonistic and chemical extremes of the venue are the thing of legend, it was also a place of escape and fantasy with a distinct soundtrack, later evidenced by Casablanca's Unrelated, A Night at Studio 54 album. From that perspective of location, it inspired Paul, and he told Zach in 1979, after Kiss had sipped gently from that fountain, "The most important criterion to judge music by is it good? If it's bad, it doesn't matter if it's heavy metal. Bad heavy metal music is as bad disco. And bad disco is as bad jazz. I think the music has to stand on its merit and not the category that people put it into. What I wanted to do was write a song that may fit into that category of disco, and yet be a damn good song. If disco had never come along, I Was Made for Loving You is still a good song. That's how I judge a good song." Paul was also very cognizant on another point, that Kiss had to evolve, since to stagnate meant personal creative death. From that perspective, the solo albums had served a purpose, expanding the sonic palette presented by the individual artist to the public. Without personal growth, there would be artistic boredom, and more importantly, the band members knew that they were no longer the Kiss of 1974, 1976, or even 1978. In late 1978, Kiss weren't the only established group to be looking to the future in that way. Without evolution, their audience would ultimately become bored and abandon them for new and more exciting music. Paul recalled in the box set liner notes, "What I realized was that all the songs there had the exact same amount of beats per minute. That way they could crossfade from one song to another without stopping. I remember thinking that all the songs I was hearing there were about today. They were about now. They were about instant gratification. They were about having a great time and not worrying about the future." By late 1978 also, there were several notable examples of rock acts exploring disco as an art form. They weren't committing wholesale treason, but were certainly experimenting with a touch of genre appropriation. The Rolling Stones' Miss You had become an accidental disco hit when released in mid-1978. Both Keith Richards and Charlie Watts suggested that the inspiration of the disco was obvious. As Kiss later did, the single was also given an extended disco 12-inch treatment. If it were okay for the Stones, then so too Kiss. Blondie's Heart of Glass crossed over from pop rock into the disco new wave, and having been released on the Parallel Lines album in late 1978, the single was taking off on the charts in early 1979. It's easy to see these two #1 hits as a powerful, opportunistic motivating factor outside of the personal, particularly if Paul experienced the power of that music firsthand at Studio 54 or elsewhere. Both singles had also performed well internationally, which would have also been noted by the suits at the label. Casablanca themselves had become the home of disco, not least due to the Queen of Disco Donna Summer, but including other major groups of the genre such as the Village People, Lips Incorporated, and the less visible Mecco, Paul Jabbar, and Santa Esmeralda. Not to mention a plethora of releases that didn't stick. Kiss knew firsthand that disco could be very profitable. Crossing genres perhaps shouldn't have been seen as shocking. Kiss had done the same thing with Peter Criss's Beth years earlier, though for other reasons, with unexpected results. They'd hopped onto the bubblegum pop revival of 1977 with their cover of Then She Kissed Me. Hell, even Peter had already dabbled with the disco pop hybrid With You Matter to Me on his solo album. Released as the second single from his solo album in early 1979, the catchy track may have been perceived as enough of a potential threat to be motivational. The common denominator there was Vinnie Poncia. Whatever the case, Paul detailed the song's genesis and faced the music.
It started after a night I spent at Studio 54, the famous New York nightclub. I had heard all these 126 beats per minute songs and listened to the lyrics and thought, gee, I can do that. I went home and set a drum machine to 126 beats per minute and sat down and started I Was Made for Lovin' You. It's funny that some Kiss fans think the song has a sanitized connotation of disco because it was written in a musical whorehouse. Studio 54 was a den of iniquity. It was sordid to a level and degree that I wasn't completely comfortable with. It was hardcore debauchery, sexual relations between everybody and anybody, and drugs everywhere. It was beyond me, but I loved going there to dance. Nobody at Studio 54 wore a white suit and danced like John Travolta. I could go down there in jeans and a t-shirt and dance. Sometimes I'd go there on a Saturday night and not leave until the next morning. I'd buy the Sunday New York Times and read the paper in bed after one last dance with a woman I took home. The music at Studio 54 was all about living in the moment, about having a great time, and so my song began like that too. Tonight, I'm going to give it all to you. Desmond helped with the verses of the song, and eventually, when we went back into the studio to work on another Kiss album, Dynasty, the producer of that album, Vinnie Poncia, helped with the chorus.
Paul had met Desmond following him attending a Desmond Child and Rouge show. Desmond recalled on his website. He was curious, so he came over to see us play. We got together and he suggested we write songs together. First, we wrote a song for my next album, which I was working on at the time. Then he suggested a co-write for Kiss, so we wrote I Was Made for Lovin' You. I was very surprised by the success of that song, but also very happy because it helped me to get through many hard, lean times. At that time, Paul had been recruiting female backing vocalists for his 1978 solo album, and the Rouge Girls were perfect. That first song written with Desmond was The Fight, and the bigger result was Paul finding a songwriting collaborator who had become increasingly important to Kiss and many other groups during the 1980s. Desmond and Behind the Mask recounted, "We were at SIR Studios and they had rented a big baby grand piano. I sat down and started playing chords for the verse. Paul contributed the chorus and was writing along with me, and then continued writing the song with Vinnie. Vinnie also suggested in Behind the Mask that when the song arrived at the sessions, the verse had already been written, with him only contributing to the chorus. And as an aside, in the same book session, drummer Anton Fig detailed receiving a lot of direction from Vinnie for the recording, using a click track specifically for this song, and the addition of separate overdubbed toms. Gene and Kiss and Makeup saw the song more as a personal challenge and believed that Paul had deliberately been trying to write a hit single. He recounted,
"By the time of the Dynasty recording sessions, Paul was specifically trying to write a hit single, and he did. He came up with one with a guy named Desmond Child. Paul's song, I Was Made for Lovin' You, dovetailed nicely with what Casablanca wanted. They were hinting more strongly than ever that they wanted to have a single from Kiss. Paul embraced this idea, and I fought it slightly. Although not out of any sense of grand principle, I would sit down and try to work with Vinnie Poncia, who had come from a different school of thought, but who I liked. He had produced Ringo Starr, and he was a pop singles guy. I Was Made for Lovin' You had a certain driving force and a catchy melody. I didn't really see it. Paul knew it was a hit song, but it was Vinnie Poncia who pushed for us to record it.
People like to dance, so Gene rationalized in the press, commenting, "We wanted to make sure that we'd have some songs they would get up and dance to. We learned something a long time ago that we'll never be able to please everybody. We had to be faithful to ourselves. Yeah, I'm sure there are some who don't like dance music. That's tough. Somebody out there is buying it, and it goes over terrifically well live." However, not all of the group was happy. Peter savaged the song and Makeup to Breakup, commenting, "Cruelest blow of all was Paul's attempt to write a contemporary hit for Dynasty. He came up with I Was Made for Lovin' You, Kiss's first out-and-out disco track. What little credibility we had left was flushed right down the toilet when he did that." Ace wasn't a fan of Kiss going disco rock, and didn't enjoy playing the tedious rhythm guitar parts on the song. But while he didn't think that disco was right for Kiss, he didn't think it was a bad song as such. But Ace's nature at the time was more to simply go with the flow, though Peter suggested privately that the spaceman's fury had been ignited by the disco betrayal. Ace told Sam Dunn in 2011, "It was a huge departure, and it was something I really wasn't happy about either because it started to get into the disco vein, and that pissed off a lot of fans. Me and Peter really weren't a big fan of that song. I didn't want to be liked by disco people. It just somehow happened, and I just went along with it because, as usual, I was outvoted." Ace had at least placed 3 of his songs on the album, so didn't need to make much of a fuss about it with Gene and Paul, with other things going on internally. However, he recalled in No Regrets, "I could appreciate the polish behind it, but I never liked the song and frankly hated playing it live. Hammering that chugga 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 chord for 5 minutes straight was not only monotonous, it often gave me a cramp in my wrist." But he also would have been a realist and known that a hit could only be beneficial for the band. Desmond later recalled on Talk Is Jericho,
I was experimenting then with a drum machine, and the idea of having dance beats with rock had occurred to me. So I kind of hoodwinked him into this idea of this like 4 on the floor, dance beat with these heavy guitars. Gene never bought it. He never liked it.
He still doesn't.
He doesn't, no.
So both Desmond and Paul claimed the beginnings of the song, so it's probably safer to say that the song simply started out live on a drum machine. There also doesn't seem to be much hoodwinking involved in motivating Paul Stanley to explore the disco element either. This song was purportedly the final song recorded for the album, according to Gene, and was brought in as they were finishing work up on the album, doing overdubs and other cleanups. That timeline seems questionable with the rehearsal recordings available. Several hours of studio rehearsal tapes circulate with the band working on arrangements and the construction of the songs, including I Was Made for Loving You. All members of the group, including both Gene and Peter on their respective instruments, were present during an hour's worth of circulating woodshedding the song's arrangement.
Okay, see how this works. Why don't we go, just try this. What if after there we go to kick drum and guitar? And then when I tell you, Peter, come in with the hi-hat. Okay, see how this works.
Clearly it was far from formally arranged at that point, with it feeling very much still under construction. Musically, some of the chords played echo into the intro melody of the Four Tops' Reach Out, I'll Be There. That's probably a coincidence.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Gene had also contradicted himself on whether he played bass in the studio, declining credit hid behind the mask. However, it would be understandable why some thought it was somebody else. Gene told Guitar World, "When we started doing all that disco crap like I Was Made for Loving You, I was told that the bass should pump along in the background. It was a dynamic shift for the band. It was also a stark change to Gene's signature walking bass lines and counter melodies." Vinny also confirmed later that it was Gene who did perform on the cut. Paul and Face the Music defended the song to a certain extent. 1.3 billion streams of the song by August 2025 supports his position.
When I heard I Was Made for Loving You being played back in the studio, I was blown away. Yeah, it wasn't Detroit Rock City or Love Gun, but it was undeniable. Another band came into the studio while it was playing and they loved it too. It was universal, something that grabbed you the first time you heard it. Was it calculated? Yeah. Was it calculated to succeed? Yes, ultimately it was. But was that a bad thing? It started as a challenge to myself to see whether I could write in that style instead of meat and potatoes rock and roll. It was no different from the challenge I gave myself with Hard Luck Woman. The only difference was the style. No apologies for a hit that people worldwide still want to hear and sing along to.
For Gene, in hindsight, with success came pressure, and he recalled in Kiss and Make Up.
Dynasty was released, and immediately I Was Made for Loving You went to the top of the charts. It was huge, the biggest single we'd ever had worldwide. To this day, it is one of the only 2 gold singles released by Kiss. The other one is Beth. And when you have a hit single, you also have a pressure to follow it up with more singles and even more aggressive touring.
There were direct and indirect consequences to the success. A bit of defensiveness developed to counteract potential negative reactions to the crossover. Paul told Cashbox's Mark Sentner, "I think the thing that is most important to Kiss is not to live up to anybody's preconceived notions of what or who we are. We don't feel the need to be bound to any one musical identity." He continued, "I think being part of the music scene and listening to as much music as I do, it would be difficult to ignore the influence of disco. All that I was concerned with was whether it was good or not. If you listen closely, the song has the same galloping sound of the early Motown hits." The Motown link was a common talking point for band members in the press at the time. Paul told one 3XY interviewer,
I thought, with everything going on with dance or with disco, I didn't think that necessarily doing a song that had a disco beat would be bad if it was a good song. Some of the early Motown stuff, the Four Tops kind of thing, those were basically the same kind of beat.
McCoy management had established an international division whose primary goal in conjunction with the release of Dynasty was to expand the group's exposure in new markets. Until that time, Kiss had been impacted by Casablanca's haphazard distribution in foreign markets, an issue that started to be remediated through Casablanca's partnering with Polygram for distribution in mid-1977. That relationship and system had taken time to build, but with earlier distribution deals reaching their contractual end in many markets, it was an opportune time to start treating international licensees as co-equal partners to promote the band effectively. Enter Jack Tesler to head the effort of engagement, and the I Was Made for Loving You single paired with its video was the perfect crossover product for the markets. Similarly, release schedules and plans were coordinated between the various affiliates responsible for international markets. Consolidation was backed with valuable marketing tools, in addition to the catchy song.
Make a 2:45 single, you go right from the first bridge right into that last chorus, which is what Peter said, half hour.
The affiliates also recognized the importance of the opportunities with those looming distribution deal expirations. While the details of the complex project were only summarized here, the efforts paid off. Plans immediately commenced to extend the band's 1979 tour into an international engagement encompassing Europe, Australia, and Japan. The tour was seen as a critical component of building a sustained momentum in those new markets. Clearly, the demographic shift at home had already been noted, and new markets for exploitation were being cultivated. Mastered on April the 20th, the single was rush-released. A Jim Burgess mix was completed a week later. While the 12-inch release of that Jim Burgess extended remix did very well commercially, executives at Casablanca were adamant that it was a one-off for the band, later concerned that it also had contributed to hurting album sales. Clearly, it had been a very calculated move, perhaps a brief capitulation to Neil Bogart's lingering desire to exploit Kiss in that format. Glickman Marks had rejected a request for a 12-inch single from Kiss a year earlier. The nearly 8-minute disco remix extended the song's duration to be better utilized in the bedroom or disco. That version of the song was later included on the Japanese Shikara CD compilation in 1988 and was also used as a B-side on various other Kiss singles. Several additional mixes for I Was Made for Loving You are also reported to have been constructed, but had not yet made it into collector circles. These include versions with the emphasis on keyboards, Paul vocal effects, different disco mix treatments, and complete recordings of the song without the fade-out. For the single version, a sub 4-minute edit was used on most international releases. The song's length was reduced by shortening the harmonizing following the guitar solo and starting to fade out earlier during the closing repetitions of the chorus. Outside the United States and Britain, where the single was rejected, I Was Made for Loving You was the breakthrough sought. It hit number 1 in Canada, becoming the group's second single to reach that plateau there. But it also hit number 1 in Belgium, Holland, New Zealand, Portugal, and South Africa, number 2 in Switzerland, Germany, and Australia, and dialed in top 20 performances in Austria, Italy, Norway, and Sweden. No previous Kiss single had charted so broadly, and the success was noted. Paul told Hit Parader's Richard Robinson, "Dynasty is the biggest Kiss album we've had internationally. The single is number 1 in Holland, it's top 5 in France, it knocks me out, it's just great. There's nothing like looking at the international hit charts and seeing I Was Made for Loving You as number 1 in Holland. That's a thrill." Internal documentation suggests that by mid-1979, over 670,000 copies of the single had been shipped in the United States alone. In Mexico, the single had sold an impressive 250,000 copies, plus an additional 118,000 copies of the 12-inch. Billboard noted in their review, Kiss veers towards a more melodic direction with this anthem-like track featuring electronic effects, the group's familiar lead, and background vocals and heavy guitar support. Some funky guitar, driving drums, and a touch of disco highlight the catchy song. The single debuted on Billboard's Hot 100 chart at number 70 on May the 26th. The same week, songs such as Hot Stuff in the Navy and We Are Family were in the top 10. Artist names should not be needed here. Broadcasting Magazine hailed the song as an image change, noting, "I Was Made for Loving You, the new single by Kiss. Surprised a number of program and music directors last week. It's the best Kiss I've ever heard," comments Lee Branner, music director at WGLF-FM, Tallahassee, Florida. And Kirk reports, "It's got a minor disco beat in the background, surprisingly good lyrics, and a great guitar lick. It's the best they've ever done." Debuting on playlists this week at 45, Made for Loving You may crack Kiss's solidly established image as music for teenagers only. There were accusations of Kiss turning on their rock credentials in some reviews, but in the mainstream that detail was downplayed. Billboard's album review also noted, "The single I Was Made for Loving You has a subtle disco beat, while the other tracks are mainstream rockers." Some at least were making it clear that it was a one-off. The single wasn't exactly a barn burner initially, with it taking 12 weeks to reach its chart high of number 11 on August the 11th. But the rise had been a series of steady jumps while Kiss broke down the genre walls. Its decline was far more rapid, with the single dropping off the charts in just 4 weeks. Still, as noted by Gene, the single was certified gold by the RIAA on August the 16th, 1979, the only single other than Beth to receive a meaningful certification. But the domestic side evaluation is not the full story of I Was Made for Loving You. A promotional music video was filmed for the song, along with Sure Know Something, while the group were in Savannah, Georgia on June the 20th, directed and produced by John Goodhue, who had a strong advertising background. He later told Billboard the reaction to the Kiss videos, commenting, "With a group like Kiss, the initial reaction from a lot of people is that it's something for the kids. After seeing the video, though, people are more interested." For Casablanca and its international affiliates, the videos were promotional gold. Also golden were the licensing opportunities pursued for the song. It was included on the Endless Love soundtrack, a successful Brooke Shields movie, as well as being licensed to K-Tel for their 1980 Soundwaves compilation. More amusingly, perhaps, Linda Carter memorably performed the song on her television show during 1980. And Jewelers Speedle also licensed the song for use on their special Let Your Feelings Show discount album with the purchase of their ident bracelet for a promotion that ran during mid-1981. Another edit of the song was included on the Kiss Killers compilation in 1982. On the Road, I Was Made for Loving You was one of just 2 new songs performed during the Return of Kiss tour due to the addition of solo album songs. Along with 2000 Men, both would remain in the set until the end of the Unmasked tour the following year.
at your feet. 'Cause girl, I was made for you. And girl, you were made for me. Tokyo! I was made for loving you, baby. You were made for loving me. And I can't get enough of you, baby. Can you get enough of me? I wanna see it in your eyes. Feel the magic. It's something that drives me wild. And tonight, gonna make it all come true. 'Cause girl, you were made for me. You know something? Girl, I was made for you. Everybody sing! I was made for loving you, baby. You were made for loving me. And I can't get enough of you, baby. Can you get enough of me? I was made for loving you, baby. You were made for loving me. And I can't give it all to you, baby. Can you give it all to me?
I Was Made for Loving You returned to the band set in 1988 and was even included on the Kiss Alive 3 album in 1993, though it was recorded during a sound check, but intelligently plugged a gap in the catalogue's representation for the period 1978 to 82. The song was the only single issued non-promotionally in support of the album in Europe. The following year, while Gene had wanted Madonna to cover the song for Kiss's Kiss My Ass project, it was reduced to a tease included on German band Die Arts' cover of Unholy, used on international and US vinyl versions of the album. Similarly, after being excluded from the primary Alive Worldwide dates, the song returned to the set for the European leg at the end of 1996 and remained throughout the end of the tour the following July. In 2003, the song was performed as part of Kiss Symphony Alive 4, something of a requirement with that recording taking place in Australia. The song was also part of the 2007 re-recordings, though at a slower tempo and a lower key. Throughout the band's final lineup tours, the song would provide some amusement to Paul. He told Steve Jones in 2017,
I was made for love. Well, Four Tops, standing in the shadow of love. You know, so there's your hook. But the funniest thing is when we do festivals sometimes in Europe where it's very much, the bands are quite heavy. Well, when we do an encore of I Was Made for Loving You, you suddenly have all these people with spikes in their eyeballs and bones through their noses singing along. So it's it's a song that seems to transcend everything, although it went through a period certainly of a big backlash against it.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, the song was included in the final end-of-the-road tour shows in December 2023. Gene's opinion certainly didn't change with time. In an interview with OK Magazine in 2018, he explained,
Paul Stanley comes in and he says, did you write any songs? I go, oh yeah, I got one. How about you, Paul? He goes, oh, I got one. I go, tonight. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, what's the next line? I'm going to give it all to you. Oh, yeah, I know what it means. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. In the darkness. Love that. There's something I want to do. Yeah, I know what that something is. Wow, that's a cool song. Okay, what's my part? Do, 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 do. You're killing me. Really? No. Do, do. I'm going to sing like my grandmother. Do, do. I hate playing that song today.
Oh,
Stadiums
really?
full of people jump up and down like biblical locusts and, stuff. They go nuts with tattoos and grills on it.
Yeah.
All jumping up and down. I'm going, do, 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 kill me now. It's still to this day, I hate that.
Never grew on you.
Still, as he admitted to Rolling Stone magazine in 2001, Paul came in one day and said, look, I've got this disco song and it goes like this, and he started singing like the Four Seasons, one of my favorite bands, by the way. I thought, that doesn't sound like Kiss, but that's precisely why we should record it. As of mid-2026, I Was Made for Loving You has accumulated over 1.5 billion streams on Spotify, making it the band's most streamed song by a wide margin. It streams over 1 million times daily.